All right, we'll call this meeting to order. It's about 7 afternoon on the May 29th, 2019. And we'll do some introductions, starting with Forrest.
Forrest Dunbar.
Dean Yates, Assistant Council.
Anna Campion.
Sadie Edmondson, intern.
Natalie Wilson, legal assistant.
Barbara Jones, municipal clerk. And Austin, you?
Yep, Austin Quinn Davidson. I'm on assembly as well. Nice to meet you, Sadie.
Nice to
On
meet
the
you.
phone, and I'm Chair Pete Peterson.
And you can call him and represent myself.
All right. We'll go to new business. We got a presentation, have some information about something that went on at the House State Affairs Committee meeting, talking about vote at home, they're calling it, instead of vote by mail.
Right. It was a great presentation, Mr. Chair. I did send the link to you in the email announcing or with the agenda in these documents. The meeting included a presentation from Dennis Wheeler, our project manager. I was out of town and wasn't available to do the presentation from the assembly or from the municipality's perspective, and Dennis was. And then the second presentation is this document that's attached. It was from Amber McReynolds. She's the now executive director of the new Vote at Home organization. And as soon as I heard it was Amber McReynolds, I said, is she the former election administrator for the city and county of Denver? And the answer was yes. Mm-hmm. And so, we did a lot of copying from Denver, Washington, and Oregon. Denver uses the exact same equipment that we do. They have Bell and Howell, which is now Fluence, for the mail sorter and signature verification system, and then they use Dominion for tabulation. So our system is identical. Interesting, the State of Alaska Election Policy Work Group traveled to Denver, Colorado to look at their program. Amber had some amazing things going on. They had trucks, connexes, and then they had red carpet that led up to the trucks or connexes for people to vote remotely. So she really is a master at election administration and public outreach. So I talked to Dennis about the actual presentation, and he said there's been no response from the State House Affairs Committee. It was very nice of Representative Christ Tompkins to invite us. But there's been no response or anything outside of this. So I just wanted to share a couple of highlights from this with you. Representative Christ Tompkins is using the term vote at home, or VAH, for the proposal there are several proposals at the state for what they would like to see happen with elections. And so I invited Anna to come because she is your public information's assistant. She manages our social media and press releases and a variety of things with elections. And this is just a really different perspective from looking at voting than what we've done before. And I would encourage you to listen to her presentation. So I'm just going to skip to a couple of the maps, but I think you can see most of it. It's just so different, just a different way to look at vote by mail as really customer-centered. It's to give voters maximum flexibility. And so you can see on the map, I've got the green map, and this is ease of access for voting. And this is interesting. These are the easiest states, and now we're going to look at some more pages. But if you turn to the next one, look at the vote at home states. It's Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, and those three states are vote at home states, and they think that that's why they're ranked so high. interestingly, Amber told us, why are Wisconsin and Minnesota in there? Because it's same-day voter registration. So those are different reasons for this high voter turnout and high voter engagement. But we thought that was really interesting. And I think if you look at Montana as well, it's a high engagement because they're doing mostly mailed out ballots anyway. So it's a fascinating map, I think, that really demonstrates that vote at home, universal ballot delivery, vote by mail, is more convenient for voters. And then I think the next page, this is interesting. One of the things that the Assembly needs to be aware of is that your last two ballots were very large. The 8.5 by 18-inch ballot is a big ballot. You're asking voters to vote on lots of really important issues. Charter changes, ML&P sale, and I think there were several other really important things this year too. Vote at home increases down ballot response. We know that even in the state of Alaska, where our judges' retention is on the bottom of the ballot, it's really low turnout for people that vote on the judges. They're tired of voting by the time they get there. But at vote at home, the numbers are higher. So then the next map again is the vote at home states. And you can see, Western U.S. is really where a lot of vote at home is happening. And even Alaska, we are, no excuse required for absentee voting. One of the things that I've talked to you about before is that I'd really like to work on our legislative package to the state. And one of the things that we would really like to see is a permanent absentee list. That would make Alaska look more like a Montana.
And I think actually Arizona has done that. I think they have like 2.4 million people that are signed up to get the ballot in the mail every year or something like that. I saw an article about that.
You are correct, because if you look at this map, the light, or that pretty blue, I guess, maybe periwinkle blue, is no excuse permanent mail ballot option. And what has happened in those states is where you have 70% of the people that are already voting absentee then switching to universal ballot delivery by mail is just not a problem.
So a bill is required to make that change at the state level?
That there is a state law that requires people to register every year to vote absentee, so that would be a state law.
What's the recourse for, or I should say, we have, in Alaska, we have an unusually high percentage of people that come in and out because of the military. So how does that permanent registration deal with those folks? That would probably be a better question for the state, because, since we're a local jurisdiction, we don't have the same requirements for military voters that the state does. Right.
But I think the state already accommodates military voters.
Well, I'm worried about the opposite. That is, if we permanently register them absentee, and then they move out of state, what's the sort of, how do we get them off of the vote? I mean, it seems like every year having to register again means that some of those folks stop doing so, right?
That is true. At probably, I'm not sure if it was our last meeting, the state of Alaska came. So Gail Fanumii, the director for the division, did a presentation on the purging process with the state. Yeah. And it's pretty complicated.
Right.
And so unfortunately, you're right. But it wouldn't make any difference for us, I don't believe, because those people would end up going through the purge process with the state, but in the meantime, they're still registered to vote. They get a ballot from us,
Yeah.
regardless of whether they had registered permanent absentee or not. The permanent absentee issue just makes the state of Alaska go to vote by mail or vote at home.
Is there some way to structure it so if you say, I'm permanent absentee and I sign an affidavit or whatever it is, I'm not sure what the process is, to say, I'm going to live in Alaska indefinitely, or I plan to live in Alaska permanently?
No, because the dilemma that you have is residency in Alaska. The definition of resident is intent to return.
Yeah.
And-
Okay. Well, even that then. I mean, if that's the language you want to use, I'm just saying that if you tied it to that, I think a lot of the folks that are cycling in and out in the military couldn't, in good faith, sign that. Or do you think that's already the case for people that?
That is already the case.
Okay.
Well, I believe you can register to vote after 30 days of residency, if I'm not mistaken, is that?
Oh, I have no problem with people that are coming here and living for a couple of years and voting. That's great. For me, it's the people that continue to claim a PFD and continue to vote when they've been living in, they're in Fort Carson or Fort
Right.
Rucker for years. And there are literally thousands of people who do that because the PFD is such a powerful incentive for them to keep their residency. And they're, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a bigger issue, and we can keep talking about that.
No, but it's fine. I mean, still, I think that's a small detail. The overall concept for the bill, I think, is great, and I'm surprised that it seems like Representative Christ Tompkins would be willing to carry a bill like that. Have you spoken with him, or has anyone spoken with him about that?
I have not, and I think I would rather, I think it would be my preference to work with the legislative committee, come up with something that we would like to propose. So that's one issue.
Yep.
The second issue that we want to propose is a change in state law that says that stamps are not a thing of value and that people can provide stamps to people. So we need to change those two things. And those are things that I'd like to take to the legislative committee.
Yeah.
When I was in the legislature,
What's
on
the
the
second
State
thing?
Affairs Committee,
Permanent absentee.
excuse me, Mr.
Excuse
Gates.
me, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, the second thing was the permanent absentee.
No, that was the first thing. The second thing was stamps.
Okay.
Yeah, your opinion about postage.
There's no bill yet, right? There's no bill yet. Sorry to interrupt.
So, I actually watched the hearing yesterday after you gave me the link, and I noticed at the top it's in the Gruenberg room, and Max was on that committee for 20 years when he was in the legislature, so it's right that they named the room after him. But he and I, every year that I was in the legislature, had a bill for permanent absentee registration, and it never even made it out of our committee that we were on because there was a different group in the majority in those days.
Oh, interesting. Not just because Max amended his own bill to death.
No, that didn't have anything to do with it. But it was actually, so I don't know, it's only been a decade, so we might be actually gaining a little ground.
I think it'd get through the House. I think the Senate would be a problem, but we
Yeah.
should at least ask.
Yeah.
You're probably
Okay.
right about that. Okay.
So the other thing that on the next gray page that I'd point out is that it was really interesting that she talked about ballot delivery. And what she said is the U.S. Post Office is the only way you can deliver ballots. It's the only universal system that everyone has. And I thought that was interesting that she was so positive about that. And, we adopted the vote by mail terms, but she's advocating for mail, but it's the vote at home. I just thought I would point that out. Then the rest of it's just backup information. Fascinating that this new nonprofit has been created. Really good work. And I thought it was important to point out to you. And that's it for the State House Affairs Committee.
Okay. Any other comments on item 3A before we move down the agenda? Okay. let's start talking about the election budget. I would assume this is the election budget for next spring, next April's election.
Did you know I'm drawing a blank? I don't remember what that's there for. And was there any specific question that someone had, or is there a reason? Can somebody remind me why this was on the agenda?
I don't recall, but I would like to ask you, so I think you've mentioned this before, but if you could recap for us, what ended up being the final cost for the most recent vote at home or vote by mail election?
The numbers that we talked to, I gave Dennis Wheeler for the State House Affairs Committee, and I believe I went through April 15th. So I estimated payroll through the end of that month, and the number was about $677,000.
Okay, and that's and remind me what it was in 2018.
988,000.
Great.
And in the last poll-based election, we estimate it's 600 to 700,000. So it looks like
Wow.
we're gonna, settle in somewhere. We did buy fewer envelopes this year. We did buy fewer ballots this year. So we know that in mayoral years, which was 2018, it's going to be more, but we're going to have higher turnout. So this might be close to the number, the 600 to 700,000 for assembly race years, which is good because it's less than the poll-based elections.
That's a huge story that should be in the. I mean, maybe we need another year of data, but that should be a story that's in the media, because there were stories right after the last one being like, this is costing more, and we got a bunch of emails. At least I did. Yeah, I know we all did.
Too expensive, right?
Saying this is too expensive, this is costing us more, and our argument was, well, first of all, it's already lower on a per ballot basis,
Right.
But second, the costs are going to come down. The fact that they did, I don't think has been told unless some of the people have interviewed you, but I haven't seen it in the media.
Tegan Handlin did do a story in the ADN, but it was part of a bigger story, so it was in there. And the state, I believe Kevin McGowan is Representative Price Tompkins. He had that info too. He found it and got some additional info, so the state has it, so we can work on that. Anna's taking a note.
And, listening to the hearing yesterday, I was surprised that the consultant was saying how much money they saved in Colorado by switching to vote by mail, compared to vote in person precincts. I suppose they have a lot larger population, but I don't know. The math seemed to work out better for them for some reason.
Well, one of the reasons is that they're purchasing equipment. So remember, we had 122 precincts that had an AccuVote machine and a ballot box, and that equipment is owned by the state of Alaska. So we didn't have that capital outlay, although it probably should factor into our costs, because I think had we considered continued poll-based, we would have recommended to you that we buy our own AccuVote machines. Ketchikan and some of the other jurisdictions do buy their own machines because they don't trust the state's machines.
Yep.
They're so old.
Yeah, they're like 20 years old or older at this point. So, well, no, part of the reason I think that the State Affairs Committee was having this hearing about vote at home was because they realized they're going to have to make a decision. Are we buying 1,000 new vote counters, or how many ever they need statewide, or are they going to go to vote at home? Or it's a decision they probably have to make some point here.
Mr. Chair, I believe they may have made that decision. The Division of Elections needs probably 5 years. They're probably already behind in planning, and they put out an RFP
For what?
for new election equipment.
for the poll-based.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And then the one other thing that I will tell you, Mr. Dunbar, you asked somewhat about the cost for next year. And in E below, I've mentioned the signature requirements on envelopes, and we talked about that at length at our last meeting, that we need to update the signature block, so we ran out of envelopes on purpose this year. We have some that we can use at our accessible vote centers where it doesn't matter. But we need to update the signature requirement on the envelope. So we're going to spend a little bit of money next year. It's not going to be a lot. We're going to just have enough envelopes to mail ballots plus some for spoilage. But that will be this year we got to use leftovers from last year.
Yeah.
All right. So we're about halfway through our time for this meeting, so maybe we'll go down to old business. We have chapter 2.7 on the agenda. That's next.
So, yeah, Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Gates.
as we've done, this ordinance addressing a vacancy on the Assembly for some time. We paused a few times because we had an election and we had an appointment process. So it's been a long time coming. And we first, who did we work with first? We just didn't remember. Now we've been working with Austin, and she's been very helpful. We had several meetings with our work group with Barbara, myself, and Austin, and Adam. And so we've come up with the product that we've passed out to today. And I've also included a crosswalk. And the crosswalk is mostly intended to explain what's the current language and the change, explain the change, and not to show you what the new language is, because that's in the ordinance with legislative drafting. And so I think I will try to maybe walk through quickly what this AO does. I apologize, I meant to remove the comments on the first page before we printed, but it was basically showing what were the issues with the language that was current and the vacancies we tried to fill, and I think I captured that. Doing the notice publication required 10 days, and the timeline allowing someone to object to a candidate's qualifications. If that process went through, we'd go past 30 days and not know the outcome. And that would be time that's required by charter to fill the vacancy by appointment. So anyways, the code changes we have, and there's a lot of them, starting on page 2. So very little language is left for this first part. And I think it's easier to look at the crosswalk perhaps. So we changed the title to be more descriptive of everything that's in this section. And then the third row here, A1 through A4, basically to give an outline of, well, when's the vacancy occur? That's the first thing that we know. Someone's died or they've resigned. And then, so how much time is left until the next election, and how much time is left in the person's term. And with this information, we have 1, 2, and 3, which sort of go, well, from that point the vacancy occurs, you can't have far out you are, and you know what our options are in terms of having a special election, or doing an appointment, or both, or not being able to have a special election. And then even fewer than 30 days remaining, the vacancy isn't filled. So we think this gives a cookbook-like sort of form for, well, the vacancy occurs, what do we do? 1, 2, 3, you fit in, pigeonhole, circumstances into one of these, and you have sort of, well, here are the options for the assembly. So the last 2 times, we had to sort of figure out through the language what to do. I think this will make it a lot easier for any leader and assembly member to understand what needs to happen next. And so I didn't through all those nuances in 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess one thing that we'll mention is A4 at the bottom of page 2. And I'm sorry, Austin, let me know if I need to speak up for the phone, okay? So A4 is a situation we've never seen and hope to never see. It's in the charter, and it's where the number of assembly members drops below quorum. Quorum is 6. So I don't know, I guess it would have to be something pretty disastrous for that circumstance to happen. but all the charter says is the remaining members shall determine or appoint a number of qualified persons sufficient to meet quorum without any description of process. And so we added since in the remaining members shall determine the process. If we ever get to that point, it would be, I guess, a sort of off the cuff.
It'd be an emergency.
Whatever needs to be done to fill seats to have a quorum, people, members read at the time decide. Yeah, exactly. Emergency situation, pretty much. So, if you have any questions that I want you to read, let me know. But I'll continue going through the ordinance and what we've done. So we put subsection B is pretty much sort of laid out again in the cookbook style fashion. Well, the process from announcing the vacancy once it's determined. And the first thing is for the assembly to designate a meeting at which voting on appointment is going to occur. And then from then you got one, put out the notice for that meeting and the applications and invitations to apply and some qualifications into processing the applications at the clerk's office. And the clerk's got to determine the qualifications, registered voter over 18 and so forth. And we get more information from candidates. I guess one of the important things to look at here is in B2 here, line 21. It used to say that the notice of the vacancy and invitation to apply has to be published for the first 10 days, and published immediately the first 10 days. And as a practical matter, you might need a day to put together the notice and make sure it's accurate, and then publish maybe 2 days after. So we didn't say immediate, we said as soon as practicable, and then publishing for 5 days instead of 10. And generally, we've seen the vacancy. Everyone who's interested knows about it. We all talk when so it was 10 days doesn't seem really necessary. And then here it's must 5 days. And we do publish on our website and leave it up there for longer. It just doesn't seem necessary to have a 10-day period, which is a third of the whole time frame for the appointment process. So we cut it down to 5. We think that that's a wise and prudent thing to do. We don't think it will affect in any way, I guess, the number of applications or amount of interest you would see. So next. More was the applications process. And before it was filling out a declaration of candidacy form to apply to the position submitted to the clerk. We've changed that to a form determined by the municipal clerk. The declaration of candidacy for regular and special elections, it's really, we base this form on that, but it's not exactly the same for an appointment. So we have this form determined by the municipal clerk, which would basically be similar, but not exactly like a declaration of candidacy form. And then we have B3, was about interviewing. And in the last 2 appointment processes, we had a lot of some of the members ask, or actually the applicants themselves also complain, but you didn't ask me the question, you asked that applicant. And we just wanted to lay out here in code clearly, so there was the quick answer. We don't have to, there's no reason, I think, legally that you have to ask every candidate the same question. They're from different backgrounds, you want to know what their beliefs are, their values, their politics are. You don't need to ask them all the same things. So we put that out here in B3. You don't have to ask them all the same questions. They're not required to take public testimony at an interview. And also that you can conduct the interviews in a lot of work sessions, comedy meeting or meeting. So it gives the assembly some flexibility in this setting up the interview with the candidates from the appointment. And that wasn't in code so explicitly before. In code it says that the assembly may have a public hearing, and usually the common understanding of public hearing is you take public testimony and then you deliberate and vote, but this isn't really like that. This is the assembly members asking candidates and applicants, and while you might have, I guess, public testimony at the end if it's at a meeting, it doesn't seem, I think, that you need to have public testimony along the candidates in front of you. So, and you always receive public testimony in writing and an audience participation at this meeting and so forth. So we're not excluding testimony, but it's not about the public being able to ask candidates questions at these interviews. It's for the assembly members to do so. Let's see. And then before page 4, you have procedural rules. And I would say that I think in general we've just made it a lot more readable and a lot clearer to understand some of the language in the current code. There's sort of some complicated Robert's Rules vernacular. And I don't know if I could explain that any better. I made it more readable. Barbara, do you want to add anything to that part? Or at any time?
You know, I think you can see we broke this into, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, we put a little heading at the beginning of it so that you know what it is. I think the procedural rules here, they were in the old code. They were a little weird, and we just tried to clarify them. I think what the code and the charter, the purpose were, once this is before you, you can't have a bunch of Robert's Rules machinations to avoid the vote on that question. So, you know, we sort of agree. We think that it's pretty important to fill that vacancy. So we tried to preserve it, but simplify it.
Yes, exactly. And here in the voting process in B5, I guess I would note that, well, while we laid out the steps in terms of distributing the ballots, gathering them, and tallying the results, these two features I sort of wanted to highlight. Page 5, subsection E, well, I guess subsection D, you need a majority of 6 to appoint a person. And here, then we've seen the appointment to fill Mr. Stevens' seat, that we went 3 rounds without having a majority, and there was some more that could go on. So we have E, where we put a cap after 3 rounds voting. If there's no majority, then the successful candidate will be selected by lot. So that's similar to a tie vote in an election. If there's a tie vote in a municipal election, the winner's determined by lot. And,
I'm sorry, what is appointment by lot?
Well,
Draw a straw, flip a coin.
Oh, I don't like that. I actually like the fact that we went through 5 or 6 rounds and finally decided on one of the 2 guys.
So I will tell you, the one thing that I like about this that Dean included is that it's the top 2 vote getters. So it's so after 3 rounds.
Yeah, I'm not going to support that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. You could have like what we actually did have. You have 2 favorable candidates and an unfavorable candidate for the majority of people, and it goes, you know, let's see, let me do the math here. It could be like 4, 3, 1, and the 1 and the 4 are actually much more similar to each other than the 3.
Oh, got it. I see.
And then you're into this thing, and then it's a flip of the coin, and the person that only would have ever gotten 3 votes is now suddenly the assembly member because of the.
it's possible.
So I don't support that. I think that.
Can I? Sorry, Gordon.
Austin?
I just want to ask a question. Because my interpretation of what this was supposed to say is that if we didn't get a majority in a single vote, we would do it 3 times, and then if we would take the 2 people with the highest amount of votes and then vote among those.
Yeah, that system. Right, and that makes a lot more sense to me.
I asked what by lot meant, and my understanding was that's what it meant. If it's confusing, we should change those words, but that was my intention.
Oh, that's not what it says, but we could do that.
Yeah, so
for the same reason as Forrest, I don't think drawing straws, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think it should be whoever gets the most votes.
Yeah. And Austin, what you're describing is like a top 2 primary almost. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I may, the
Sorry to interrupt you.
circumstance that I think
that's
could
okay,
happen
thank
that
you.
we need to consider is that there might not just be two. You might have, for example, 3 candidates, 3 votes each in one. You know, that's the 10 of you remaining, and then 3 ties. So you might eliminate many other candidates there are, so that 3 to vote for in that language at the top. 2 highest number of votes. You could have 5 and 2 and 2 and 1, for example. So then you've still got the one with 5 isn't a majority. So you've got 2 votes each. You might still have 3 people eliminate one. But if you do it by law, I'm sure just gonna it's chance. That's true. So that's I think the I don't want to say disadvantage, pro and con of it. But this is a policy choice. It's how you want the system to work.
Right.
And this is why we brought this question to the county.
Right.
We talked about this at length among Austin and Board.
Well, I think seems like we
And
might
I
need,
am so
might
sorry,
need a
guys.
little more
I
work
think
on
I
this.
cannot-
Go ahead, Ms. Quinn
I
Davidson.
can't understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't understand what Dean is saying through the phone. Could someone summarize what you just said?
He just said that there are. Well, actually, Dean, do you want to try maybe speak closer to the phone?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Sorry, Austin. So I was saying, although we're talking about, so after the 3rd round, just the top 2 highest vote earners continue for the next round of voting, and that might work. And I was saying, well, we need to consider how that would work if we have 3 candidates who have the top 2 highest number of votes. It might be a situation where you have 10 votes, you have one person earning 5, not a majority, not enough to win, and you have the next 2 with 2 votes each, and 4th candidate with 1 vote. So you've got 2 tied for 2nd place. You actually have 3 candidates as the top 2 highest vote earners in that round of voting, the 3rd round of voting, in my example. So how do we deal with that if we eliminate the rest? We still have 2 people to vote for in the next round. And, I mean, the process might continue, as Mr. Dunbar said. We just continue until we get a majority among those 3, or perhaps we go the next round, the top 2 highest vote earners again. Maybe it will be 3, 3, 3. Who knows?
Yeah.
So we have to consider the possibility of these other scenarios.
Well, and, the chair could announce after the 3rd ballot that to remind the candidates that they can withdraw their names at any time. And that might spur a difference, or maybe after the 2nd ballot or something.
Okay.
I don't know.
I also think that the way this language is written covers that. I mean, it says the applicants. It doesn't say the 2 applicants receiving the 1st and 2nd highest number of votes. So if there's one person who got 5 and 2 people who got 3, well, that's we're going to be back in the same problem. Say one person who got 5, 2 people who each got 2, and then some others.
Yeah.
Those 3 applicants, the way I read this, because they both got the 1st and 2nd highest numbers, those would all be in the 3rd round of voting. Or those would be in the next round of voting.
Mr. Dunbar.
So let me propose a potential solution here. So first of all, I actually think that what happened in Mr. Perman's appointment when we were filling Mr. Steele's seat, where it came down to 2 clear favorites, we had a number of rounds, and eventually one of them withdrew, is kind of the ideal situation, where we had 2 highly qualified applicants that were acceptable to the majority of the body, the vast majority of the body, and eventually one of them did the right thing. I do see a situation where maybe we get to a point where that can't happen for whatever reason. But until we get to that point, I think we should just continue going, continue voting, continue debating, continue discussing, let people drop out, whatever. So my preference would be to basically eliminate E. And if we wanted to rewrite it, say something like, I wouldn't go with 1st and 2nd. I think the only case, for me, like the only case where there's a tie that needs to be broken is if you have a 5-5 tie. So, we're assuming here that all 10 members are present. If all 10 members aren't present, then you're going to have an odd number regardless. So you need a majority of the body, you need a majority of the people present.
We've been debating that.
So
I
think-
would say it's a majority of the body, and the majority of those present is the same at that time.
Oh,
Is
interesting.
that right, Dean?
The majority of the body and the majority of
So do you have to have 6 vote in favor, or do you have to have a majority?
Of those currently there.
This is interesting because we had that debate, and there's language in chapter 230 that says the majority means in this chapter
Oh,
6. But this is in chapter 270, not chapter 230.
Okay.
I would say yes, that still means 6, especially
Sure.
if something is important
I'd like
as an
to-
appointment.
I'd like to alter that so that it's something like a majority is a majority of the body present, in case we are at a situation where we have 9 members. And then other than that, I would say I would be willing to introduce flipping a coin or drawing straws or whatever it is, only in the case of a 5-5 tie. Basically, that's the only time I think it would be acceptable. If you have like 5-2-2, I don't want there to be or 5-3-2. I don't want there to be a situation where that person with 3 votes goes into a runoff essentially, and then gets the luck of the draw. I think the only time I want what's that?
I just wanted to say I agree with that.
Yeah, and so for me it would be, I think and take away the 3 vote cap here, where it's like, you must enter this next procedure after 3 cycles, and just take away the cap, and basically say, if there is a 5-5 tie, the chair has the ability to enter a situation where you draw straws or flip a coin. Like, that would be my preference. So you can go as many times as you want on a 5-5 tie until some outside force intervenes and says you're going to flip a coin. But I don't want to artificially say after 3 or after 4. I want us to keep going. So that's my preference.
That sounds
Ms.
good.
Jones.
I agree with all of that. And I'd also like to remove, which maybe will already happen if we implement what Forrest suggested, but I'd like to remove the term by lot, because I think that's part of what's caused confusion, because I actually thought we were doing something different than what this apparently means. So if we can take that out.
Okay.
Ms.
Mr.
Jones.
Chair, I wonder if we want to think about a situation. So 2 things. One, what if there is a 4-4 tie? What if you only have 8 members present?
You have to vote.
What if you only have 8 members present?
Well, then we're in trouble. Then the chair probably shouldn't have scheduled the vote then.
So, and then that would be another question that I have for you about a majority of the body present.
Yeah.
And I'm just bringing this up to you because I think you need to think about this. You can appoint at a special meeting. So a special meeting isn't scheduled. A chair could schedule a special meeting when certain members aren't present.
Yeah.
And so
To try to manipulate who would get, I see what you're saying.
So I think that is one of those things that Dean cautioned you on, and I just want to bring up that is the opposite side of that.
Of making it 6 as opposed to a majority of the body present.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
But members could call in for this. They don't have to be present in person, is that correct?
That's a difficult question because you may be operating in your quasi-judicial mode here. I don't know if you are for organization or not, but I think we should check that out. If you can participate telephonically when you're organizing. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's tough because you have to submit a ballot. It's
That's
hard to
right.
submit a ballot over the phone. On the other hand, I do see a situation where someone is out of town for a couple of weeks and these things can happen suddenly after you plan something for months and you got to go do it, and then this happened. like we have with Mr. Steele,
Mhm.
or even Mr. Moskian, that these
Correct.
things happen suddenly.
Or we could allow them to vote by text message or computer, if, instead of, being there to fill out a paper ballot. It would still be, the only people that would know how they voted would be the clerk or whoever was counting.
Sure, the clerk could transcribe it, and then it would still be available like the others.
Right.
I think that could be problematic. I think email in particular is prone to hacking. How do we preserve that record?
Yeah.
I think the other part of the code is clear, that when a person is participating telephonically, they have to vote audibly, is what the code says.
Mm.
And I think that's important because you know that that's that person voting.
Right.
So we can explore that.
I mean, I suppose they would just say the name of the person over the phone, right? I mean, that's,
Or I think the other option is we're getting pretty far into the weeds and the what ifs.
Yes, we are.
And I think one of my law school professors said the dog would limp, if you only had 3 legs. So, maybe we go back to what you said, Mr. Dunbar, and that Ms. Quinn Davidson agreed to you, and just take this section out.
yeah.
And then, just like with Mr. Steele, you deal with it when it happens.
I guess my thing, yes, I certainly want to take E out. I certainly want to not cut things off after the third round. I guess my suggestion would be to take E out and replace it with something like, in the event of a 5-5 tie, the chair may call for a coin flip to determine the outcome. And, but I'm not totally wed to that, but I think, and you're like, whoa, if it's a 4-4 tie. Well, this is, again, like hard cases make bad law. In most cases, it's going to be a 5-5 tie, if at all. And even that's pretty exceptional.
Right.
And
Mr.
when you
Gates.
say the chair may decide to have a coin flip, is that the kind of chair decision that the members could object to and vote to override?
Oh, yeah.
In the
Good idea.
procedures we have, that's how it usually is, and the chair makes a decision. And I was going to mention also about the majority voting requirement. Part of our code also says that this 6 is required, the majority of seats. When it's to pass or carry a measure, and measure is defined as an ordinance or resolution or a charter amendment, or an ordinance proposing charter amendment. And I think in appointment is sort of the importance and significance is on par with like a resolution appointing someone to a seat.
Sure.
So I'm caution against going below that 6 for majority percent. But that's just my thoughts on.
Well, and we're
Can I?
we're down to about 4 or 5 minutes left in our meeting, and the next thing on our agenda is creating a drafting subcommittee to consider charter changes. So maybe we should go there and create a subcommittee to work on this between now and our next meeting.
Actually, Mr. Chair, we have been working on this since August. We are this close on this one. It is ready to be submitted. It's ready for a work session. I would like to suggest that we take a couple of minutes and maybe finish this.
Okay. All right then. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess we're back to the idea of how many people are present, but I don't think you have to specify that it's a 5-5 tie. I mean, if it's a tie, then I think it's fine to flip a coin, right? I mean, do we need to say 5-5?
Well, can you be tied 3-3-3?
Yeah, but then shouldn't we flip a coin if that's what we end up with?
Well,
Yeah, but coins only have 2 sides.
to roll a dice.
Or, okay, then rock, paper, scissors, or whatever. To me, it's like, if you go, and if at some point within the chair's discretion, there's a tie,
I see.
somehow.
I just don't want a situation where someone with only 3 votes, who would only ever get 3 votes, is able to become appointed. And I think if you make it 5-5, then it's clear that the default is we keep voting, right? and we keep doing it, and we keep having the debate discussion, we keep going back to the ballots, and until we get this very special case, you know. And I mean, the alternative to me is also just get rid of E at all and not have anything, and basically there's no procedure to break a tie, and you just keep going until people get tired and exhausted and cave, which is what they do at, like, I don't know, the Democratic National Convention or whatever, right? I mean, they
Nominated on the 52nd ballot, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Ms. Jones.
Mr. Chair, there is one other option, and that would be in 4D, and that's a motion to reject all applicants, and that is always in order.
Yeah.
So if you were at this stalemate and you were on the 52nd vote, someone could make a move to reject all applicants, and then you wouldn't fill the vacancy.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that we'll end up talking about this with the whole body in a work session, because people will have a lot of thoughts about this. So maybe we, take that out and put what Forrest suggested, and then sort of leave a comment to discuss and go from there, because I think this will be a hot topic.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and schedule this for a work session.
What'd you
Sort
say,
of
Allison?
broader contextual comments that I don't think Dean made at the beginning, but maybe I just didn't hear him, which is that we did consider changes to the charter, but it just seemed more difficult, and it seemed that we wanted to move forward with sort of cleaning this up to the extent we could, and then considering the charter changes. And so I see that that's on the agenda next, but this doesn't contemplate any changes to the charter. And on page 2, the way we organized it, the fewer than 30 days remain in the term, between 30 days and 6 months before the next regular election, those all follow the charter, but I particularly wanted to lay it out that way because I felt that the language as it was written was a little confusing, and you could get turned around as to whether you were doing an appointment and or a special election or neither. And so if this is helpful, that's great. We'll present this to our colleagues. If it's not helpful, let us know.
Okay, Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, first I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
Is there a second?
15 minutes. Austin, you'll have to second it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're extending the meeting by 15 minutes.
And then can I have a
Mr.
comment
Dunbar.
here? So I guess I did realize that you had bifurcated, I think. So we had originally talked about, both the streamline the process for appointments, but also the special election process. So, because in your case, it's too compact, basically. We don't have enough time to comfortably run a vote-by-mail special election. So we are not dealing with any of those issues here. Is that correct?
That is correct, because they're in the charter.
I thought there was some stuff that was in code that we could alter.
Well, this is what we can alter
Okay, only the
by
appointment.
a couple of things that we've eliminated. 5 days to 10.
Yeah.
The immediate publication, we've reduced all of those. Those are very, very helpful. And I think Austin has some great comments that the burden is really on the candidates. But I think the different question will be your charter drafting subcommittee. I think you have to take a look at whether to change the charter, because 60 days for a special election, I think, again, it's problematic for the clerk's office. If it was area-wide, the whole muni, that would have been really difficult, like a mayoral.
Yeah.
But I think Austin will tell you how difficult it was for her as a candidate.
Sure. And the appointment process you have laid out here, the notification process, is that only in cases where we are going to have a special election? So what about cases like Ms. Demboski, where we were close enough to the regular election, we didn't have to do that? What's the appointment process there?
Ms. Davidson?
Quinn Davis.
It's for both.
Davidson.
Okay.
So this is at any, right, Barbara, this is at any time you fill a vacancy by appointment, this is how you do it.
Right. It works perfectly for both, and it clarifies that the assembly can do both, and when you can do both.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Gates.
Yes, I just wanted to add to the conversation what our charter says about special election timeframes. And we know what it says about filling a vacancy, I'm assuming, by special elections within 60 days. And it's interesting that Charter Section 702A is about filling a vacancy on the school board. They shall fill it by appointing a qualified person within 30 days. And they serve until their next regular election. And there's no special election option to fill a school board vacancy. So that's interesting. And then the vacancy in the office of the mayor, it shall be filled at a regular or special election held not less than 90 days from the time of vacancies. They only have 90 days for the mayor's office. It sort of makes sense to me, that the assembly be 90 days as well for special election with justification.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Dunbar.
So, Austin, are you ready to? I mean, it sounded like you were, and I want to confirm. Could we get this, since it's got your name on it, introduced for the June? What's the date? 18th meeting.
Yes.
And maybe with that one change, and then, like you said, well, the work session, maybe some amendments. But I think this is, close, and if not already there, and I'd like to see it get out into the public.
Yeah, that timing sounds good to me. I will say that I'm going to be at a conference and I'm not going to be able to attend the work sessions on June 14th. So knowing that we might end up talking about it on that day, I might suggest the meeting after the 18th.
Well, it would only be introduced on the 18th, right? So if we introduced it on the 18th,
okay. Yeah,
we could have work
that's-
sessions in between.
Yep, sounds great.
So it would be on our agenda the first meeting in July.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you lay it on the table for the 4th or 5th.
Yeah, sorry. No, that totally makes sense.
Okay, well, I guess that'll be the plan then.
I don't know off the top of my head, when I think our meetings are the 9th and the 23rd. Ooh, that's a bad meeting day. Nobody's going to be around for work sessions on the 5th.
Right.
Well, no, but we could do it we could do it next, the week of the 18th. We could do it like June 22nd, right?
We could.
Yeah.
So we'll do a work session Friday, June 21st.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's
Right?
calendar. That way.
Okay?
Or even or the 28th, right? Either of
Oh,
those.
yes, we could do June 28th too.
Yeah.
And I won't be here on the 28th. Sorry, I have a bunch
Okay.
of summer stuff.
21st,
But,
probably better.
but I don't have to be there, but I think it's helpful maybe. So, yeah, 21st sounds great. And then sort of in the vein of using committees and following a standard process, is this something that we should discuss like in the rules committee or in a committee, or should we just go straight to a work session? And maybe that's a question we can ask Felix.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to go with the work session,
Yeah.
to get the other members
Okay.
involved and get, see what kind of comments they have and ideas.
Yeah, given that it's already come through this
Great.
committee, I think the work session would be sufficient.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay. We have another meeting in this room, but so we can whip through the other things quickly if you would like, Mr. Chair.
Right, let's go to creating a charter subcommittee. Would Mr. Dunbar and Ms. Quinn Davidson be willing to be on that committee?
Sure.
Yeah.
Come on, Forrest.
Well, I mean, it depends. I guess I'm not totally sure what we're talking about. There's a lot of potential charter changes. You're talking about just for the special election procedures?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's just say just for election procedures.
Okay.
Election procedures, right.
I'm already proposing a charter change. A couple charter changes coming up, so.
Sounds like you're all ready to go then. You're practicing. So that
Who else is on this committee?
Miss Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to put her on the committee since she's not here.
Yeah, fair enough.
And Barbara, for that subcommittee, will you lay out for us, I mean, I'm familiar with some of the changes you want to make as they relate to what we're discussing here, but will you generally lay out for us where you see opportunities to make changes and what your recommendation is, and then we can go from there?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, let's go down to item E. I actually was doing some Google search here, and have got a little information. Actually, in the state of Arizona, it's actually a felony to harvest ballots, and so they took it very seriously there. It's legal, totally legal in California. It's not legal in North Carolina, but it was done, and so they're in the process of changing their code. And people in the state of Montana passed an initiative to make ballot harvesting illegal.
Illegal.
Mm-hmm. So there's, every state, or there's quite a bit of difference between states and whether they allow it or disallow it. But I think the tendency at this point from the information and comments that I read from citizens was they felt it was a way to manipulate an election by a political party or a candidate or a group. And,
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, another way to say it is that you've got groups that are trying to help drive turnout and are helping people cast their ballot, right? I mean, I get that people feel that way, but first of all, I think if it's a felony, it's a state law matter. It's not in our purview to
Right.
make legal or illegal.
Right.
And second, I mean, some people have more difficulty voting than others, and this is very common. Like during the civil rights movement, black churches helped get a bunch of ballots together, and increase their political power. They go to the polls together so they couldn't be intimidated. Like I think there's a flip side to this coin, and so my preference is to let sleeping dogs lie and not take on this issue. But yeah.
Well,
Mr. Chair, I think the biggest issue that we have right now is continuing our work with the state of Alaska on the undeliverable mail. That is the issue that we really need to address that potentially will resolve the concerns about this. And we have a plan. We're going to send the postcard out early. We're going to get with the state to enter the undeliverables from the postcards into the state database in December or January, so we're not mailing ballots to these people. We think that will be a potential solution to this concern.
okay.
So I guess I didn't understand. The concern is that some people are voting ballots that are not theirs. That's the issue?
That there's people in California that said that took place in their 2018 election in some congressional districts.
Okay. I mean, we have no evidence at all that that's happened in Anchorage, where we have like 2 cases, I think, right, where like a father voted his son's ballot and...
Totally different issues.
Okay.
So, and I think we need to be cautious about that. Ballot harvesting is a really negative term, and I think one of the things you're talking about is ballot gathering. What is the line where ballot gathering, taking my elderly neighbor's ballot to a drop box,
Right.
what's the line where that's illegal? If I do 2 elderly neighbors, is that illegal? I can drive them to the polls, but I can't take their ballots to a drop box. So I do have some concern about, but ballot harvesting is something that sounds a little more sinister, and
Sure.
what that probably is someone pulling a bunch of ballots maybe out of the trash, undeliverable ballots.
You'd have to be able to forge all of their signatures.
Right, going to door, knocking on doors, saying, did you get your ballot? Did you vote? No, I got my ballot, but I didn't vote. Well, let me help you vote. And then, but that is election fraud. It's not ballot harvesting, and it's not ballot gathering.
Right.
So I think we have to be really cautious about this.
Well,
Can I ask Barbara, and aren't there already penalties? I mean, if you grab someone's ballot out of the trash and forge the signature and send it in, there should already be penalties for that, right?
That's already in code.
Yeah.
Yes, that's already illegal.
Well, and just for informational purposes, there are, as you can imagine, quite a few differences from state to state. For example, North Carolina requires 2 witnesses to sign on an absentee ballot, and only a family member can mail or deliver that ballot. In Arizona, they require no witnesses and just the voter signature on the absentee ballot.
Well, and that's us.
Yeah,
So,
which I prefer. I mean, North Carolina has a notorious history of voter suppression, right? I mean,
oh, they do, absolutely.
right. So I'm not looking to them as a model.
Well, and I expect that their laws are going to be changed significantly after they have to, end up planning a special election in that
Yeah.
the congressional district
But that was
where the guy actually went and he was getting information from the Division of Elections in North Carolina to tell him whose absentee ballot had already come in and whose hasn't, and he was going to specific addresses to collect ballots from people who hadn't sent them in yet.
That's legal in Alaska, and political parties do that in Alaska and in Anchorage.
well, I don't know if they go to collect it, but what they do is they send them reminders.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, used to call that knocking and dragging on election day, where you'd actually go to the individual who hadn't voted and said, here, you need to ride to the polls because you're going to vote for me, type of situation.
Well, I mean, it's funny. I just, if that person is still making the conscious choice to vote and they're signing their signature, then I think that worry, to me, it is far outweighed by the opposite, which is the penchant for voter suppression or making it more difficult for people to vote. Like what you're talking, knocking and dragging, to me, it can get a little bit, can feel a little icky, but that to me is far preferable to the kind of voter suppression that can result if you pass a law that makes it too difficult to vote.
All right. Well, anyway, this subject will take some additional discussion, but anyway, I think our 15 minutes are up, and so we are going to have to adjourn. Last comment, Mr. Gates.
Yes, I was going to ask, so at the last meeting, I believe that you asked me to sort of draft something about ballot harvesting and how our law applies. Do you read that down? It doesn't sound like it from the conversation now that you're really anything from city council in terms of researching that issue.
I don't know if we're quite ready for that yet.
Okay.
All right, well let's go to Artie's participation.
Can I ask one question just really quickly, Mr. Chair?
We're actually past time already, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Sorry.
Okay. I'll talk to Barbara about covering it next time.
Okay.
Records 1:12 p.m. by the correct time. My name is Eugene Carl Haveman. I represent myself. I follow the public process. When the public process is done, appropriate decision made by the governing body is more like the public interest. Please don't use the wall clock. That's not the clock to use. When it's Dunbar McKinney clock, it's 1:12, as I stated. I'll be brief. Number 1, 3A, presentation on House State Affairs Committee meeting regarding vote at home. It would have been nice that when this whole date, time, and meeting made a note of at the last Assembly Ethics Selection Committee. Select few knew about it. I mean, the Assembly members I'm hearing were note about this thing, but keeping that thing secret is not really appropriate of a substantial meeting held by the House State Affairs Committee. Second is notice this meeting. There's 2 locations that are known for this meeting to be on the community website. Okay, the standard one is should notice when I walked into the building today for the meeting, the guard didn't even know that there was going to be a committee meeting here today. Normally you see blue tags on parking spaces, and there's a reason why. Because on the community website and in the standard location, there was no notice of this meeting, but there was a notice in another area showing this meeting. So I check both of them because I see from time to time inconsistencies, and if you don't look at both of them, you're going to miss knowing about a meeting. And there should be a standard where the standard notices are, should be with this notice of the meeting, and this did not happen in the standard notice. And then I think I'll just end my comments and just because I just made comments there. But that's it. I'll just end there. I'll be brief. And the time is 1 minute 9 seconds to spare, and it's 1:14 with 1 minute left in the meeting without doing extension.
Move to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.
Who?